Volatile oil prices are fueling the world's economy. This is Business 7. Welcome to the program. In this show, we'll be looking at local fuel prices, and Mines and Energy Minister Tom Alvendo will be talking around that. We will also look at the tourism sector and what current developments are now that tourism is sort of returning to normal. Also later in the program, we will be looking at the IMF's latest growth forecast model for sub-Saharan Africa. Please stay tuned.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
Will fuel be cheaper if Namibia has its own oil refinery? Mines and Energy Minister Tom Alvendo spoke on this.
Let me talk about maybe then. I hope that somebody was again going to ask the question of why are we not importing oil from Angola? Because this question keeps coming up. And various reasons are being, given to say why we cannot do that. The real reason really why that might not be possible is this. People argue to say, well, fuel is cheaper in Angola. That's why Namibians go and import that fuel, albeit illegally, into the country because it's cheap, which is true, it's cheap. Fuel is cheap at a pump. It's a pump in Angola. But the real story is this: that Angola buys 80% of Angolan oil are imported into the country at the very same price we are importing the oil. It's the very same price because they buy from the same market. Now, the question then, how come then they are able to sell that cheaper to their citizens? The only reason why they are able to sell it cheaper is because they have got crude which they sell. They don't refine themselves, they only refine 20% of that. They sell it out there, and therefore with that revenue, they are able then to subsidize the price of refined product when it lands in the country. Now, if you are Angola, and Namibia comes to you and says, oh, I want to buy petrol from you as a country, why would I sell it to you at the price I'm selling to my citizens at a subsidized price? I would probably say, well, this is what I bought it, and therefore I'll put my margin on that price, and that's what I'm going to sell it to you. And I think that's what we miss the point to say, yes, it's cheap, but it's true it's cheap, but it's not because that's the price at which they are buying the product. And that's really a point that we need to get across, that it's not going to be possible because they buy the same product from the same people, and therefore it's not possible. The only thing we're hoping then that to say, if also we are in the same position where we have got revenue that we can subsidize, that would be possible, but we don't have that capability, unfortunately. And that's really the real reason. And again, just to say, while it really as a consumer, as an individual consumer, who doesn't want to pay a lower price? Everybody wants to pay a lower price. But all what it means that if we do that, we are not going to be able then to maintain our roads. We are not going to actually be able to do some of the things that we were able if we were to buy the product the way it's supposed to be bought. But individuals, it might make sense for you as an individual to say, well, I just want to buy what is cheaper. But that's not, if you look at the macro level, unfortunately, it's not sustainable. And therefore, we still want to tell people to say, it's not in the best interest of the economy to continue then on a large scale to use a product from other countries. In fact, in our discussion also with the Angolans, they are not quite happy because now the reason why they subsidized, they were not intending to subsidize Namibians. So they're also quite not happy the fact that Namibians will then go and buy that product illegally to actually export it out of the country without the Angolan permission as well. So it's not as if the Namibian government is simply the one saying, no, don't go and do that. But equally on the other side, they're saying, look, now here we are trying to actually use our own revenue to subsidize our citizens. But you as Namibians are now coming actually to use the same subsidy at a larger scale. It's one thing when you go in Angola and fill up your car. That's something else. But it's another thing when you actually go and truck it out to come and sell it here. So I thought I would just mention that because this is where it's becoming a topical issue.
While Namibia and its cities are seen as one of the cleanest countries in Africa, plastic pollution is a big problem. Therefore, it's up to each of us to do what we can to reduce the use of plastic, especially single-use plastic bags. At Liberty Life Namibia, we've taken the decision to turn all our old branding items into reusable shopping bags. It's a way in which we can drive sustainability and look after our most important stakeholder, our environment. If you also believe in sustainability and would like more information, please get in touch. Liberty Life Namibia. In it with you.
We do have investors who come to us now and then to say they want to build a refinery. And this has been coming a long way. Not where the government builds a refinery, but private investor with a refinery. One of the reasons why it did not happen is simply because of the economics of such a refinery. For you to build a refinery, it must be sizable for you to benefit from the scale of what you are going to be producing. And if you are talking about the scale in Namibian terms, it cannot be for the Namibian market because our market is so small. So if you're going to speak about the scale, the volume of that refinery that you need to actually refine the product to make it economically profitable, you're probably going to have to consider the SADC as a region. Because the investment that you need to refine a product, you need to have enough quantity that can sell for you to be able then to recover your investment from that refinery. And that has been always the problem. If the biggest market is not in Namibia, it's somewhere else. Now, if I were to build a refinery, why would I build a refinery here and export or transport the biggest volume somewhere else and adding more cost? Chances are I will probably go where the market is the biggest. Although it does not mean that you cannot build a refinery. You can still build a refinery. As I said, if you have really got, like within the SADC region, I think the economic cooperation that we have got, it actually makes it easier for you to be able to supply within the region without having too much hindrance in terms of the transport cost. That is possible. But you must still have enough crude to put through that refinery. You must have that crude available all the time for you to put that in the refinery. The other element is all this, because people say, well, if you invest in a refinery, it's going to be cheap. It doesn't follow either. It does not follow that the countries that has got refineries in their countries, fuel is cheaper. It always depends what are the costs involved in you refining, because nobody's going to sell the fuel refined from a refinery at a price less than the cost. So it does not follow to say when we're going to have a refinery in the country, which I agree is a great investment, we should promote that. But let's not think because of that suddenly it's going to be any cheaper. But all what you'll probably gain is that at least you got security of supply, because you have got a refinery in the country, and therefore if there are problems of supply and demand, chances are at least you do have access to a product. But it does not necessarily follow that it's going to be the cheaper than other refineries. So I thought that it was maybe a general discussion about, how does refinery work and how do we go about investing? But obviously, it's something that we need to consider. And now that we also have discovered oil, and depending on the volume, Angola has got a crude. Chances are the two countries can say, well, because we need volume, why cannot actually, get together and find investors who can invest in the refinery, and we are the one then supplying the crude. So it's possible, yes, but it's not necessarily going to be cheaper simply because you have got the refinery in your country.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine is already impacting the near-term economic outlook for sub-Saharan Africa. Sharply higher food and energy prices are going to hit the region's most vulnerable households, exacerbate food insecurity, raise poverty rates, and possibly lead to social unrest. Countries that rely on wheat imports directly from Russia and Ukraine are going to be impacted by surging cost of food prices. But they're not the only ones. Prices have risen for most other food items, and all countries in the region will feel these effects. We expect the effects of higher energy costs to be more uneven across the region. Higher oil prices will generate a windfall gain for the region's 8 oil exporters. But for the other 37 countries from sub-Saharan Africa, higher oil prices will worsen trade imbalances and increase living costs as well as transportation costs. Consequently, the region's growth has lost momentum. Economic activity in 2022 is now expected to slow to 3.8%, down from 4.5% in 2021. The economic recovery is expected to accelerate in 2023, with growth trending at about 4% next year and beyond. But this pace of growth is not enough to make up for the lost ground from the pandemic. It also makes creating jobs, fighting climate change, and achieving the region's sustainable development goals significantly harder to achieve. Moreover, the economic outlook remains highly uncertain. In addition to the negative impacts of the war in Ukraine, inadequate COVID vaccination rates leave countries exposed to new waves. Security issues and risks of political and social unrest also remain a concern. First and foremost, on health, the region needs to accelerate its vaccination campaign to contain risks of new COVID-19 waves. And on economic policy, governments are facing 3 short-term priorities. The first is shielding the most vulnerable households from rising food and energy prices through targeted transfers or subsidies without aggravating debt vulnerabilities excessively. Second, containing inflation without undermining the recovery will also be important. Central banks need to be prepared to raise rates if necessary, guarding against financial stability risks and maintaining a credible policy framework. And third, managing exchange rate adjustments resulting from rising interest rates in advanced economies and greater uncertainty due to the war in Ukraine will also be important. Now, looking beyond the pandemic and current geopolitical tensions, strong, inclusive, and sustainable growth will require crucial economic reforms. Broadly, three areas of such reforms are: first, enhancing economic diversification. Second is maximizing the private sector's potential through strengthened trade integration, private fund mobilization, and digital innovation. And third, addressing the challenges posed by climate change by investing in adaptation and seizing the opportunities offered by the transition to new energy sources.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
An uptick in tourism in Namibia has been reported. But how does tourism in Namibia look, and what are the new trends in tourism? Ceres Capital team consisting of Roland Brown, Annika van der Vaart and Robert McGregor talk about the issue.
Okay, and now when we do start to see tourists come back, assuming that there is no further outbreak or new variants, I mean, do we expect that to take a certain form? I mean, is it certain types of lodges, certain types of facilities that are likely to get the first benefit, or do you think it'll be fairly evenly felt?
I think it will be less tour travel, group travels. That's what we've also been hearing from the tourism sector is people aren't booking these major tours anymore. So, and rather prefer to rent their own vehicle and only be with 4 or 5 people per vehicle. And I think that will also have an effect on the type of establishments that we'll see first come, first serve, so to speak. So to say, I think, for example, the more budget travel establishments that look at hosting groups will probably see less of the demand coming in.
Robert's raising his hand like a kid in school. So
no, I think also, I mean, in our engagements with the industry, what it sounds like is the nature of that has changed. So obviously from these bigger groups into smaller groups, but it seems that also with that and with the uncertainty we've had over the last couple of years, the tourists tend to book the vehicle first, and from there on they'll decide. The idea of booking sort of your accommodation isn't as important anymore. We hear that, you know, more and more often tourists arrive at accommodation establishments looking for accommodation rather than booking in advance. And I think that's sort of a big shift we've seen with the disruptions over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so you don't have as much value at risk in case there is an outbreak or, you know, another lockdown or something like that. Makes sense. I mean, another thing that's maybe just interesting is the purchasing power of people in our source markets. Do you think there's been much change there? I mean, we know in Namibia there's been a big deterioration in people's purchasing power as a result of COVID. Not your high income people as much, but your middle income, low income people. Do you think we've seen the same in European markets?
So definitely not. I mean, what we've seen in these in our source markets, which are more of the advanced markets, firstly, I mean, they tend to be a lot more tertiary sector based, and that's obviously a lot easier than to sort of implement work from home policies, not have too much of a direct impact on household incomes. But we've also seen substantial government support for people in this country, so unemployment benefits and similar. And so that's obviously cushioned a lot of the effect for those countries.
Yeah, and I think a lot of them have been saving now after the past 2 years, and they have the travel itch. So I don't think I think they have enough funds to spend, and they're ready to travel now.
Okay. Yeah, I would have thought that your higher income markets, your higher income individuals would have been less badly hit, and therefore would be the first kind of group to return. But I think the argument makes sense that people have, actually not spent as much over the last few years because of bars and restaurants and things being closed. Working from home, saving on travel expenses, etc., etc. And, I think especially those who've now just made it through the darkest parts of winter in Europe will be ready for some sun.
Thank you for watching A Business 7. Last week, the International Monetary Fund released its latest growth forecast for sub-Saharan Africa. We're playing out with their infographic on that. And until next week, goodbye.